Old driver with hidden knives in a smile, super a female lead rebellious and rebellious villain who explodes and reborn with just a flick. After Ye Changhuan's death, she found out that she had dressed up as a cruel female protagonist. She had saved the troubled male protagonist and taken him as her disciple to teach him carefully. She helped the second male protagonist overcome his inner demons and became close friends with the third male protagonist. However, they only approached her to kill her and save Bai Yueguang. The three of them lured her into a trap, one cut off her path, and the other killed her to take pills. But it was only after her death that she suddenly realized that the person she loved was her. When they found her again, they mercilessly broke through her and made her become a useless person, only relying on them to live and achieve HE.Reborn Ye Changhuan. You can't die, you. The merciless way of fixing farts, the scumbag man, the master's backhand enters the path of slaughter. Killing scumbags, hating green tea, and raising a little villain who hasn't turned black. But she didn't know that the villain had also been reborn. Chapter 1. Nightmares. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At night, there was a loud bang hanging from the end of the earth. A woman in a crimson robe quickly shuttled through the dense forest, with a mysterious moon hanging high, and the tall and slender figure of the man behind her could be faintly seen. Her panting became increasingly heavy, indicating that her physical strength was exhausted. She hoarsely roared. Meng Yunqing. You're a bastard who steps on a horse. Master, you don't need to shout anymore. He won't come. At some point, the cultivator teleported to Ye Changhuan's eyes, his narrow eyebrows and eyes completely devoid of the familiar intimacy and respect that Ye Changhuan had. Instead, he coldly drew his long sword. After all, his task today was just to bring you here. The long sword. Ye Changhuan recognized that when she dug out Yi Ming from the pool of blood, she took the young man as her disciple. Although she lay flat and became a salted fish, she was not stingy with her disciple. Therefore, on the night before his apprenticeship, he declined the kindness of his senior brother Qin Cheng and personally went to Wanjian Mountain to find this Feihong sword as a gift to meet him. Surrounded by the fierce aura of Wanjian Mountain, she almost broke her leg there, but to obtain a prefecture-level sword, there is always a price to pay. She still remembers when the young man was full of joy and said to her with a burning gaze, "I thank you, Master. I will definitely practice well and live up to Master's expectations." He did indeed cultivate well, with outstanding talent, reaching such a high point that he drew his sword and aimed it at his master. Master Meng is truly considered a confidant by his master. His invitation is truly on the master's guard. When Yi Ming uttered these words, a mocking smile curved from the corner of his mouth. Ye Changhuan's cold face turned against Zhou Xian, but in fact, she secretly accumulated strength. Little beast, you are so rebellious. Even if I die, all the people in Penglai will be deceived. My senior brother Qincheng will not believe you, and you are not afraid of being cut alive by him. Qincheng is now the first person she thinks of who she can trust. As a senior brother, he treats Ye Changhuan like an elder brother. But I didn't want Yi Ming's smile to deepen a bit. Master, why don't you give it a try? After his words fell, Ye Changhuan unleashed his spiritual power and flew in the opposite direction without hesitation. This is the hanging heavenly cliff. Once halfway up the mountain, it is the residence of the outer disciples. Once there, she has vitality to find. But as she was getting closer and closer to the mountainside, her speed suddenly slowed down. Ye Changhuan's eyes were full of disbelief, and her cultivation was violently suppressed by a force, quickly falling below the foundation. Puff! Ye Changhuan spat out a mouthful of fresh blood and felt a huge pain all over her body. Her muscles and veins were broken, and she almost fainted from the pain. Just now she realized that there was a formation suppressing cultivation here, otherwise she wouldn't have chosen to escape, but she didn't expect it to be the technique of the Penglai sect's undisclosed Fu Tian formation. The Fu Tian formation compresses the cultivation of strong individuals, and the most ruthless may even cause the cultivator's muscles to break and their cultivation to dissipate. However, in today's world, apart from the Penglai sect leader, only one person is proficient in this technique. Big Senior Brother. Ye Changhuan struggled to speak, and lifted her eyes to see a straight figure standing among the nearby tree shadows. The night was too dark to see his face clearly, but she could feel the killing intent of the other person. Ye Changhuan has never been in such pain before. Over time, she has been diligently making a salted fish, and her biggest fear is the pain of skin and flesh. Qin City even jokes about her delicacy and laziness, but every time she gets hurt, he hates being so stubborn that he takes out the best medicine. Oh, when can you grow up and practice well? As an only child, Ye Changhuan felt her elder brother's care and warmth for the first time. Therefore, when she realized that Meng Yunqing Yi Ming had set her up, she was sad but not hopeless. But now, the fact is in front of her. Her close friend lured her into the trap, her senior brother set up his most proud formation and used the most cruel means to break her entire meridians, while her disciple, who she carefully taught and cared for Ye Changhuan only felt a tear in the dantian area, and the Feihong sword pierced through her body. The warm breathing of the cultivator sprayed in her ears, and her whole body almost hugged her. Ambiguous yet transcending distance. If he didn't hold her golden pill bloody in his hand. She fixed her gaze on the monk's eyebrows and eyes, carefully examining inch by inch. When the other person met her gaze, she dodged for a moment and then stared back, revealing a cruel and proud smile. Master, don't hate me and don't look at me like that, otherwise I can't help but dig out your eyes. Ye Changhuan suddenly woke up with a start, tightly gripping her neck with both hands. The rapid gasping sound was unpleasant and difficult to hear in the absence of oxygen. Across from her, a thin, weak, and cold boy coldly watched her actions. Hooking. Host, you have another nightmare. A mechanical voice rang out in your mind, with a light tone. Get used to it, even the female protagonists of sadistic literature are like this. It said bored words, but Ye Changhuan didn't let go of her hand, as if she couldn't hear it. She pinched it tighter and tighter, and the suffocating feeling made the system start to short-circuit. Only then did the latter realize the urgent scream. Let go of it. I'm going to die. Ye Changhuan's eyes widened and she stared fiercely at the boy across from her. Her strength continued to increase, and there were signs of imminent death. The sharp cry of the system is piercing. Unfortunately, except for Ye Changhuan, no one could hear the eerie silence of the leaking dilapidated house, leaving only the unpleasant sound of breathing. The two of them just stared at each other, and just as the system thought their task was about to collapse, the boy finally moved. He is very thin, dressed in tattered coarse linen clothes, looking malnourished, but unable to resist the beauty of bone and skin, with a hint of pale and childish elegance. Unfortunately, there was no vitality on that face, and compared to Ye Changhuan, who was on the brink of death, he looked more like a dead person. The cold hands forcefully grasped Ye Changhuan's wrist, wrapped it with a cloth strip at the head of the bed, and buttoned it behind his head. Ye Changhuan began to struggle fiercely, and had no choice but to use both hands and feet to firmly imprison him. After finishing all of this, he lowered his head, without any ambiguity, and spoke coldly. You're going to die. The person who finally took a deep breath, and their dazed eyes gradually regained their clarity. The system also breathed a sigh of relief. I'm almost there. Next time you're a little late for a cup of tea, I'll definitely pass away on the spot. Ye Changhuan said nonchalantly, without the joy of surviving the disaster in her eyes, only a dead silence remained. The system says that this is the stress response she experiences due to excessive stimulation, which is the most taboo mental demon for cultivators. After all, as a modern person, no matter how surprised they may be in the mall, it won't be easy to see their closest person shatter their muscles and veins, and after cutting pills with bare hands. The bloody impact challenged her nerves, and now she only hopes for a while before she can forget to adapt. Forgetting. Can you forget it? Ye Changhuan's eyes were completely silent. My hands curled slightly, as if grabbing something and forcefully cutting it out. Chapter 2. Who loves to be the female lead of Cruelty writings? You are listening at Novel Full.audio. This is the 10th day of her rebirth, when she was reborn into an adopted daughter named Gu Sishan. The family that adopted her only had an orphan and a widowed mother, and the child was still a well-known celestial ghost and lonely star. From birth, a flood fell from the sky, and most of the village died. The whole family was left with only an old mother and a young son. After this kind of luck, finding a wife would definitely be out of the question. Therefore, the old mother adopted an orphan daughter who was rescued from the flood and named her Shan. At first, Ye Changhuan thought that she, as a passerby, was lucky enough to be killed and live again. Although this place is located in a remote area west of Dongzhou and has sparse spiritual energy, it is not a problem. She can practice again and must kill all the people who killed her at that time. But just as she had this idea, a mechanical sound came to her mind. The host's anticipated action severely disrupted the plot. Please stop immediately and continue according to the plot. At that moment, Ye Changhuan realized that she was not traveling, but reading books. She wore it into an NP abusive text, and she was the female lead. Since childhood, she has had extraordinary talents, but her cultivation can only stop at the golden elixir. Her younger sister's cultivation takes 1,000 miles a day, but her destiny is unstable, and her life is not long. To put it simply, if the original protagonist could live to be 200 years old, when the plot was about to develop, in the 150th year, Ye Changhuan came over and unknowingly took over all the plot after encountering Yi Ming. She was then stripped of her elixir and died inexplicably. Your sister, as the White Moonlight, will be approached by the protagonists to help you successfully form a pill, so that after killing you and tampering with your destiny, she can be dissected for recuperation. Silly plot, Ye Changhuan sneered. Please use the civilized language of the host. After being killed, you were reborn as Gu Sishan. In this life, you do not want to care about your past kindness, grievances. You only want to work hard to cultivate a peaceful and indifferent life. Therefore, you chose the ruthless path, overcoming obstacles and finally becoming a young talent with unlimited scenery. Regarding this arrangement, Ye Changhuan remained non-committal, merciless and willing to leave without caring about favors, grudges, or grievances. I want to fart. The system continues. But the male protagonists realize later on that they have long fallen in love with you. They cry bitterly, they regret it, they have found you, and when they look at you with ruthlessness and lack of love, they have already forgotten about them, which makes them extremely angry. Therefore, they unite and break your ruthless path, causing you to lose all your cultivation and become useless people. You can only rely on them to live. Ye Changhuan started looking for a knife. You persevered and begged for help from your adopted brother. There was still a childlike relationship between you, which angered the male leaders. They tied your adopted brother to a banquet of various immortals and killed him with 10,000 arrows piercing his heart in front of cultivators from all over the world. From then on, everyone knew that there was a pearl on the palm beside the male leaders that no one could die. You resist, you cry, you make a fuss, being held and kissed by men, and after giving them poison, you are deeply confessed. It turns out that they have always known that you have been poisoned, and you finally feel heartbroken and regretful. You sacrifice your sense of smell and taste to save them and embrace them deeply. Ye Changhuan had never thought of it this way. Let me die immediately. Sorry, the system cannot fulfill this request. Your younger sister will appear again. Faced with the White Moonlight, the male leads are still wavering. They misunderstood your malicious heart and almost caused your sister to fall, so they dug out your eyes as punishment. You are heartbroken and disheartened, fled to the mortal world and fell into the brothel. You were forced to pick up guests and swore to death, jumping down from the 3rd floor. Ye Changhuan breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Mad, I'm finally dead." System. Not dead, the host can rest assured, you just have paralyzed legs and need to lie in bed for a lifetime. Ye Changhuan. System. But it's not important anymore. The male protagonists know the truth and have found you. They repent day by day and become the immortal lord, demon lord, and medical immortal. You will be their treasure. Your sister also fully understands and apologizes to you personally. In the end, you lean against the arms of the male protagonists, hold her hand, and show a relieved and happy smile. Ye Changhuan endured it for a while, but in the end, she couldn't help but say, "I'll go step on your horse, Grandpa. Please use civilized language, otherwise electric shock punishment will be triggered." Ye Changhuan didn't bird it, because she finally found a rusty kitchen knife from the corner and without hesitation put it around her neck. If the host commits suicide, they will continuously fall into a cycle of plot twists and turns until the plot is completed. Her hand stopped, visibly irritable. Why me? Why should I tell you the plot? Since she didn't want to kill those big animals, she didn't want to go through such a mentally disabled plot on her own. After completing the plot, the host can be resurrected in the original world, but I didn't die at all. My life is taken care of by a specialized nutritionist, and my working hours are regular. I remember when I traveled here, I was just taking a nap. This is also the place that she couldn't think of the most when she first traveled, but she thought it was not dangerous and safely retired. Now that something is wrong, as a businessman, Ye Changhuan's thinking reaction is extremely fast. Let me think, since I'm here, what about the original Ye Changhuan? Does she know she's the female protagonist of sadistic literature? Does she know that she will be both human and ghostly in the future? The system is still silent. Ye Changhuan said, "It seems I know now." System. So she ran away, right? I was pulled over and took her place. As one of Ye Changhuan's vests, Gu Sishan doesn't exist either. She's just a soulless shell, right? The people above you don't even know that the person ran away, do you? You're hiding it, you want to solve it quietly. The system regretted it for the first time. It chose Ye Changhuan because the other party had outstanding business achievements, was smart and sharp enough to complete the plot well, but it did not expect the other party to guess a side with just 1 point. But it didn't have a chance to change people. It secretly pulled Ye Changhuan over and almost caught the attention of the General Bureau. The system of the small world that was not well maintained will be crushed into fragments and recycled, so it can't take another risk. After half a minute, its sound only sounded. Host, being selected is both a blessing and an honor for most people. Please follow the plot, otherwise you will keep repeating it. However, the system has some forgiveness for you and can accept small changes in the plot. Host, you also really want to go back, right? Ye Changhuan fell silent. She understood the current situation too well. This so-called system had already been burned to save her life. Even if she didn't want to, there were 100 ways to force her to do so. Before her strength was not enough, she was nothing. Ye Changhuan believes that she is not a proud person, who tends to follow the crowd and flatters the common people as long as it is beneficial to her. So she slowly put down her knife and the corner of her mouth curled up. If I complete the task, I will definitely have a lot of wealth as a reward, right? The system knows that what humans care about the most is not life but money. Ye Changhuan's tone is that wealth is like life. It seems that he was just pretending to increase the price, and he has confidence. Of course, the host will have 10 billion. Yi Chang's laughter deepened and he said, "Master Jin, everything you say is right. Advanced artificial intelligence always brings a sense of superiority to humans, but if the system can patiently read Ye Changhuan's information and carefully calculate, it will know that Ye Changhuan's total assets are equivalent to a small country's GDP for a year." At the same time, Penglai, thousands of miles away, had just quietly completed a funeral, and the eldest daughter of the leader, who was forever stuck in the golden core, fell. "You deserve it. If it weren't for her domineering behavior in her mother's womb, causing Sister Changle's life to hang on the line since she was born, how could she have been living these years? Thick-skinned, why don't we have a leader's father? The speaker's eyes were filled with jealousy, but the next moment he let out a painful cry and his left hand was directly broken. A long sword fell on his neck and said, "Big Senior brother, please spare your life." Standing opposite him was actually the chief disciple Qingyun, whose face changed from its usual gentle and extremely cold. "Peng Lai doesn't accept talkative people, get lost." The nearby disciple quickly pulled the person away and ran very fast. "When did you become so angry?" A person walked out from behind the tree, dressed in blue clothes, with picturesque eyebrows and eyes, exuding a graceful and ethereal demeanor that made people feel at ease and obedient. If Ye Changhuan were there, they would surely believe that this was her former confidant, Meng Yunqing, who invited her to hang on the cliff. Qin City's expression remained unchanged and he said, "Rules are rules, and you cannot go beyond them. How is Changle doing?" Meng Yunqing's words softened a bit and said, "It's already great. In the future, the path to immortality will be smooth, and you won't be constantly worried about your life. Why do you regret it?" Qin City remained silent, only looking at the rudimentary white sails on the eaves before finally saying, "That's what she owes Changle. Changle has beautiful scenery, and she shouldn't have lost her life because of a useless cultivator. She deserves it. By the way, Yi Ming has been out since that day. But what's his urgent matter? Where did he go?" Meng Yunqing looked towards the direction of sunrise. Dongzhou. Chapter 3. Reborn Villains. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This is a dilapidated thatched cottage, with a crumbling lush wall and a blown hole on the roof. It's like heavy rain outside and light rain inside. The cold wind at night made Ye Changhuan shiver. She looked up at the young man on her body, her pupils were very dark, and the corners of her raised eyes always gave people a seductive and sentimental illusion. Some even wanted to refuse and welcome the boy who shackled her said, "Did you have a cramp in your eyes?" Ye Changhuan. Ye Changhuan kicked the person down with one foot, and the young man let out a muffled groan. Because he hadn't eaten for a long time, he didn't even have the strength to stand up, so he sat directly on the ground, with a hint of coldness in his eyes. "If I dare to slow down a little longer next time, I will kill you first before committing suicide." Ye Changhuan spoke without any apologies, looking at her tightly bound hands. She frowned and clicked, then sat on the edge of the bed and kicked the boy. "Unlock it for me." His tone was harsh, as if he hadn't seen the other person's murderous eyes. Seeing the other person still sitting still, Ye Changhuan raised her eyebrows and said, "Gu Si is evil. Don't forget that before Auntie died, she made you swear to listen to me. You don't want to give up your oath, do you? As a cultivator who is about to enter the immortal realm, violating the heart oath can lead to the birth of a heart demon." And across from Ye Changhuan was her now shell-like younger brother, calling her elder sister Gu Sixi. Okay, this brat has never called her sister before, he keeps calling her by her first name. And he, also known as the unlucky guy who was tied up at the banquet of the Immortals and pierced by 10,000 swords, had a baby kiss with his original body. In theory, although Ye Changhuan has no conscience, she shouldn't bully an unlucky person. However, as soon as she was reborn, she encountered a flood that was even more terrifying than when the unlucky person was born. Gu's mother only had one last breath left, holding her hand and instructing her in her sign language, "You must take care of this evil." After speaking, he breathed a sigh of relief and gave Ye Changhuan no opportunity to explain. Ye Changhuan said, As the young man involved, he looked at the old man with a calm expression and closed his eyes, also a kind-hearted person, Ye Changhuan thought. This flood killed many people, and Ye Changhuan hastily buried the old man with a half-year-old boy. Afterwards, she stood on the side watching the flood surge, thinking that she would first take this boy to stabilize the plot before she could properly calculate the rest of the system. At that moment, she heard a sound coming from behind and almost startled when she turned around. At some point, the young man was already standing just 2 steps away from her, his pale face cold and indifferent, and the darkness in his eyes quickly restrained as she turned around. He wants to push her down. Ye Changhuan can almost be certain. Even if she didn't do anything, she must have this idea. Does this little brat want her to die? She suddenly remembered that in the original work, Gu Si was born with a flood, leaving only his mother and him in the family. He was naturally cold-hearted and had no kindness towards Gu Si Shan. He resorted to any means to achieve his goals and was a character wandering in the gray area. If it weren't for the fact that the protagonist was finally influenced day after day by her innocence and kindness in the later stage, she might have become a crazy villain. So, this kid wants to kill himself. If we talk about this, Ye Changhuan won't be tired anymore. She's not the Holy Mother, it's strange that she can give this cub a good face. I just promised to raise a child for someone, so let's set the same standard as raising herself. Just don't die, why bother so much? From then on, the conflict between the two never ceased. The young man placed dirt in her meal, and she was able to put the food on his head. She turned her head and was almost kicked by the young man. She didn't even want to pull the young man on his back and almost threw him out. At first, the system wanted to persuade a few words, but when it saw Ye Changhuan's malicious smile, it still wisely shut up. It always feels that if it persuades, the youth will be even more miserable. Fortunately, Ye Changhuan had never left the young man behind, and the young man had never left her to run away. The two maintained a delicate balance like this. Sure enough, Gu Si's disgust on his face was too lazy to conceal upon hearing this. The oath I made was before entering the Immortal Sect. His voice was cold. After that, whether you live or die has nothing to do with me. Ye Changhuan proudly reached out his hand without hesitation. Gu Si couldn't bear to see her being a petty person and biting her teeth to untie the cloth strip. System. Host, he's so fierce. At this time, Gu Sixi has no intention. You need to be careful. Since Ye Changhuan agreed to follow the plot, the system has gained a bit more popularity. Ye Changhuan sneered, the little puppy owes him a lesson. I have plenty of ways to deal with him. According to the following plot, she should show no complaints about the cold-blooded and heartless Gu Si's humanistic care, and then, after the other party finally accepted her, because she was humiliated by the male leads and pierced through her heart, she once again strengthened her relationship with the male leads. But Ye Changhuan never thought of forgiving those fools, and naturally wouldn't care for anyone. She only wanted to shake off the person after entering the Immortal Sect, so as not to make this unlucky person a big injustice, and could be considered as repaying gratitude to Gu Mu for this soulless body. As the cloth strip was untied, Ye Changhuan cautiously picked up the knife at the head of the bed, which was used in the village to cut firewood and even rusted, but it was the only thing they had to defend themselves against now. Is there any news of someone from the Immortal Sect tonight? Gu Si sneered, they all drowned. What's the use of coming? 3 days ago, the rainstorm in the west of Dongzhou almost aroused a flood that is rare in 100 years. Of course, it doesn't matter to friars, but ordinary people will suffer. According to convention, the immortal sects belonging to these regions will send cultivators to save people, firstly to cultivate merit, and secondly, every year ordinary people will only provide countless offerings. If everyone dies, the daily expenses of the immortal sects will collapse. Of course, Ye Changhuan did not expect others to come and save her, but rather the sect that came this time. She and Gu Sixi were selected due to their talents and thus embarked on the path of immortality. She hadn't spoken yet and was ready to take a nap. She had been eating less and less in the past few days, and they hadn't eaten for 2 days. She could only rely on sleep to alleviate her hunger. By the way, he occupied the large and rudimentary bed board. At night, it was pitch black, and only shallow breathing could be heard. She couldn't see the boy sitting on the ground with no intention of getting up. A pair of black eyes stared at her face, inch by inch, delicately tracing her face. Silent word by sentence. Leaves. Long. Happy. It's not Gu Sishan, but Ye Changhuan. The tone is lingering, with endless hatred and killing intent. Gu Sixi never expected that after being pierced by 10,000 arrows, he would return to the age of 15 as soon as he opened his eyes. He has always been the plague god in the eyes of others. He is blamed for floods, epidemics, deaths, and even occasional colds. They smashed his head with stones, scolded his mother, and smashed his home several times, but it didn't matter. He was used to it. He only knew that he wanted to cultivate immortality and become the most powerful immortal, so that those who looked down on him would all kneel down. At first, he had no feelings for Gu Sishan, but he was a weak woman who didn't know how to resist. He would always forgive being bullied and even advise him to forgive him together. He was really annoyed by such people, and naturally never thought of really treating Gu Sishan as his fiancée AE. But when he was scolded, this person would comfort him, and when he was injured, he would secretly give him medicine. Unconsciously, he really indulged in this hard-earned family relationship, treating her like his own sister. She was bullied and driven away by him, and he supported her in cultivating a ruthless way. After her ruthless way was broken, he thought of finding a brother-in-law who could know the cold and the hot. But later on, he was tied up at the banquet of the Immortals by those people, suffering from all the insults, while his good sister, watching him pierced by 10,000 swords in her heart, said those people that as long as she pleaded, they would let him go. What did his good sister say? She said, "The cultivator has gold under his knees, how can he be willing to be lowly? I will not yield. The evil will definitely understand me, you can't make me kneel." He didn't understand. He only knew that at that time, he looked at the stubborn and righteous woman with disbelief, thinking that he was trying to save her and escape from the group of animals that had caused her to lose all her cultivation, bowing and bowing. At that time, was he willing to be lowly? He thought he was the only relative, so he thought of him so much. Ye Changhuan. Ye Changhuan. He roared and was pierced by 10,000 swords in his heart. After death, his soul briefly lingered for a while. Watching Ye Changhuan shed crocodile tears after his death, turning his head to be with those beasts, he realized that he was simply ridiculous. He finally understood that if he was really good for him when being bullied, he would stand in front of him and face him together, rather than useless comfort when no one was around. If he was really good for him when he was injured, he would take him to seek medical treatment instead of throwing him a bottle of the most ordinary injury medicine for trouble. Ye Changhuan, Yi Ming, Qin City, Meng Yun Qing, if there is a next life, if there is a next life. He must kill all these people. Ye Changhuan, Ye Changhuan. In the dilapidated room, the young man silently recited over and over again, staring fixedly at the sleeping girl across from him, his eyes flashing with a crazy killing intent. Boom! A thunderous roar. Outside the dilapidated thatched cottage, joyful voices could be heard. Immortal! Immortal is here! Immortal is here! Chapter 4. Dongzhou Qingyun Sect. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Immortal. The Immortal has come to save us. Come and see. Come out and welcome the fairy. Excited cheers shattered the silence of the night, and Ye Changhuan suddenly opened his eyes and sat up. Seeing that Gu Si had already walked out with his evil back to her, without any abnormalities, he followed him out of bed. Outside, bursts of flowing light flashed by, and in the midst of the heavy rain, it was as bright as daylight as splitting the night. Even Ye Changhuan has seen so many cultivators flying swords for the first time. After all, Pinglai has strict rules and emphasizes returning to simplicity. He has received very few disciples, so naturally there would not be such a grand occasion. Didi, the mission to enter the Immortal Sect is now open. The sound of the system rings. Ye Chang smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'm absolutely reliable when I do things." System. Really? I don't believe it. It was too cautious. Originally, it wanted to say something, but after a pause, it decided not to tell the host for now, as it wouldn't affect the plot anyway. Gu Sixi leaned against the door on this side. If he remembers correctly, this time Qingyun sect came not only to solve the flood disaster, but also to accept disciples. He and Ye Changhuan were found to have been worshipped by the superior spiritual roots of the sect. At that time, the oath he had made before he was reborn was also fulfilled. He could kill Ye Changhuan and those who had caused him a tragic death at any time for a while. The two siblings each had their own ulterior motives. Immortal. The village chief stumbled forward, and a few well-dressed and elegant cultivators stood not far away, their faces showing disdain as they raised their chin. Qingyun sect's mission, hurry up and call everyone out. The village chief quickly agreed and turned his head to push out the young men and women in the village. Ye Changhuan noticed that they were all under 16 years old, with the youngest being 10 years old. Sure enough, they were here to test their spiritual roots and recruit disciples. The village chief lined up more than 10 people, and when he arrived at Gu Si's place, his eyes were filled with disgust. However, due to the presence of the immortal, he could only curse softly and say, "Sweeper star." Gu Si's evil expression remained unchanged, as if he couldn't hear anything. He lowered his head and played with the small stones at his feet, exerting a slight force. Ah! The village chief let out a scream and half knelt on the ground with his left leg. He was supported by someone and said with concern, "Uncle Wang, what's wrong with you? Are you okay?" The village chief felt a sharp pain in his left leg, and after seeing the beautiful face in front of him, his tone improved. He waved his hand and said, "So it's Si Shan, it's okay. I'm getting older, it's just cramping." Ye Changhuan is only a few months older than Gu Sixi now, only 2 months away from 16. He smiled with no intention and said, "That's good. I still have some medicine for the wound here. I'll send it to Uncle Wang later." Gu Mu used to be a skilled medical woman who could cure any difficult or complicated illness. If it weren't for this, even under the name of Gu Si's evil celestial demon Lone Star, they wouldn't have been able to stay well in the village. Therefore, the village chief did not refuse upon hearing this, and his heart grew even more fond of the girl. He sighed, "Good girl, following that broom star has really hurt you. But don't worry, your good days are still ahead." Ye Changhuan smiled shyly and did not deny it. Just watching the village chief leave, turning his head to face Gu Si's dark and heavy pupils, his mouth silently opening and closing. "I know it's you. If you don't listen, I'll file a complaint, and don't cry." The demeanor of a petty person achieving success is not concealed. Gu Si didn't feel guilty even when he was caught, and he turned his face away coldly. He's not a child, only ghosts can cry. The interlude was quickly interrupted by the voice of the cultivator, and the leader's gaze swept over everyone. This time, our Qingyun sect not only came to save people, but the sect leader also showed great kindness and ordered us to recruit like-minded people to join the beginners program. "Are you willing?" It was said to be an inquiry, but the tone was unquestionable. Looking at the surprised expressions on the faces of these ordinary people in front of him, he showed a hint of contempt and curled his lips, saying, "It seems that no one wants it anymore." He happened to walk up to Ye Changhuan, who gave a green smile. Gu Si is ready to test the spiritual roots. The next moment, the cultivator pointed to Ye Changhuan and said, "That's you." Gu Si said, "Dot." As he spoke, he ordered a few more people. When he walked over to Gu Sixi's side, he met his eyes and his eyes lit up. He said happily, "And this one, take it with you." Gu Si's evil expression slightly changed. He was completely different from his previous life. He remembered that in his previous life, Qingyun sect had arranged great power and even used the Tianshui mirror, which was specifically designed to test spiritual roots. However, this time, he simply pointed out. He carefully observed for a moment and found that the cultivator Lin Lin had chosen a total of 5.5 young boys and girls, just like the ones chosen in his previous life. This made Gu Sixi feel a little relieved. The world is unpredictable, and not everything will remain unchanged like in the previous life. For example, Ye Changhuan had already shown a hypocritical and ugly face. Your luck is good. Our sect is planning to hold a grand banquet this time, and we have encountered a distinguished guest who will be present. At that time, famous cultivators from Dongzhou will be among them, which is a rare sight in a century. Fairy, can we also go? One of the selected people happily asked. He is the oldest among this group, already 16, and with a slightly better family background. Which one should be the leader? The cultivator glanced at him and said with a smile, once you go to the sect, you are members of our sect. Why can't you go? As the words fell, those who had not been selected all cast envious glances. This was already a remote small place, where a cultivator from a small sect would make the whole family ascend to heaven, not to mention being favored by a major sect. For a moment, even the gaze at Gu Sixi, the celestial demon and solitary star, became friendly. The 5 were even assigned to live in the best courtyard of the village with the monks, which was also the oldest home among the 5, Lian. Lian was surrounded by 3 people and, as expected, arranged Gu Sixi in a corner. He proudly said. Immortals can say that this time we go, we can be considered disciples of Qingyun sect. It's 1,000 times better than this dilapidated place, and the days we went were all immortal days. Really? Isn't that so that we won't have enough to eat anymore? When is it that you only care about having enough to eat? Lian looked down upon him, but saw the speaker shyly looking at him, feeling instantly relieved. At that time, there were countless gold, silver, and jewelry that could still be cultivated into immortals. What was it to have a full meal? Some people had good luck and bad luck, but were also selected. It was really unlucky. He didn't give a name, but it was no different from giving a name. Sitting in the corner, Gu Sixi closed his eyes and felt the veins of his body, as if he couldn't hear anything. That would be great. If it's really so evil, I won't go hungry again. I can rest assured, brethren. You're really amazing, you know that. That's nature, Lian was praised with great enthusiasm. But brethren, I want to go out and deliver medicine to Uncle Wang, can I? Yi Chang laughed happily. Go ahead, go ahead. If it's not that I'm saying, see Shan, it's just that I'm too soft-hearted. Now that you're about to enter the immortal path, don't continue to entangle yourself with that broom star. He's not worthy of you. You should come back early after watching Wang Bo, and we'll leave early tomorrow morning. Ye Changhuan, who received permission, did not refute and gratefully said, brethren, you are really kind. The youthful and shy appearance of the young girl is extremely useful for Lian. When he regained his senses, Ye Changhuan was nowhere to be seen. Instead, he saw Gu Sixi, who had just been in the corner and seemed mute, walking to the door. What are you doing outside? Scan the stars. I forgot to take the medicine, I'll send it over. Gu Sixi took out a can of injury medicine that had been used for most of it from his arms and looked up at him. Or do you say, you'll send it over? He handed it to Lian Li and had originally intended to curse, but when he saw Gu Sixi approaching him, he quickly shouted, no need. Stay away from me. I'll send it to you. Don't pass on bad luck to me. His attitude was timid, but Gu Si sneered contemptuously and turned around to leave. Pooh! What are you pretending to be? The broom star has killed the whole family and villagers. How can I deal with you when I see the sect? Lian's harsh words were naturally unheard of by Gu Sixi, and if he heard them, they would only be a joke. There were many people he wanted to kill, and Lian was not even worthy of them. With the help of the monk's magic in the village, he also regained some vitality. He passed through most of the village and probably knew that he had been selected by the immortal. This time, no one scolded him for throwing stones and vegetable leaves at him. By the time he arrived at the village chief's house, it was already late at night. Wang Laohan killed his daughter-in-law in his early years, and because he was gambling, he had no children or continuation. He was the only one in the family, and Gu Sixi kicked the door without any burden. I saw the old man Wang inside the door pressed to the ground with his face trampled on by someone. The whole room was full of alcohol, and his tongue was sticking out. Ye Changhuan looked up as he stepped on him, and saw that Gu Sixi had no hint of shyness in front of Lian. He said in disgust. "How did you come? If it's any later, people will be reincarnated at 3.5 years old." Gu Sixi said. Chapter 5. Two Disgusted Couples. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You didn't call me, Gu Sixi reminded her. From beginning to end, from the moment Ye Changhuan was selected, she seemed to have turned into a butterfly, either circling around Wang Laohan or Lian, and didn't give Gu Sixi a direct glance. Not to mention eye contact. Can't you guess? Ye Changhuan spoke confidently. Kick old Wang to Gu Si's evil feet. Gu Sixi no longer explains, there is no reason to explain in front of this person. Although he appeared obedient in his past life, he is now too lazy to disguise his own wickedness. So he lowered his head and shifted his attention to the painful old man Wang beside his feet. Wang Bo, you also said that you feel sorry for me, an orphan. How could you bear to hide it from me? Why did the cultivators of Qingyun sect come to select people this time? If you don't say it, I won't care about you. Ye Changhuan's secluded voice was like a leaky cotton jacket. Wang Laohan was writhing in pain. He used to drink freely, but in a daze, he saw Ye Changhuan walking in. The little girl was beautiful, so he was a little careful. What happened? No matter how unbearable he is still more qualified than the little livestock of the Gu family. But he didn't expect to be kicked in the face and firmly stomped on the soles of his feet as soon as he raised his hand. Little slutty hoof. So you used to pretend. Joining forces with this little beast to plan against me, you wait, I'll have the immortal kill you all and feed the dog. Wang Laohan is not afraid at all. Ye Changhuan just looked at him quietly for 2 seconds and sighed. What is sighing for? Wang Laohan was puzzled, and before he could react, he felt his hair being grabbed and lifted up all over his body. Force him against the wall. The head and walls made a bone-shattering sound, and the old face was covered in blood, completely unrecognizable. Wang Laohan was almost numb in pain, and the panic of death swept through. However, Gu Si was pulling his hair like a dead dog, smashing him onto the table in front of Ye Changhuan, with blood splattering on his face. Speak up. Wang Laohan. Qingyun sect naturally recruits disciples when selecting people. Otherwise, what other good intentions do you have? I was just too angry and didn't respond. Don't hit me, don't hit me. He cried and shouted. He didn't understand why someone was selected by the Immortal sect and still had doubts. Upon hearing this, Ye Changhuan raised her eyes and glanced up and down at Gu Sixi, sneering and raising her eyebrows. Is that all? Gu Si pursed his lips wickedly, and the young man looked at his emaciated figure, but his strength was not small. He lifted Wang Laohan's head and smashed it at the table. For a moment, blood splattered. No, no. Don't smash it. Wang Laohan even heard the sound of his bones breaking. It would kill, really kill, these two lunatics. Yes, it's to entertain VIPs. I chose you to entertain VIPs. The hand grabbing his hair was released, and he collapsed on the table like a dead dog, convulsing and speaking. Qingyun sect has arrived with a distinguished person. We are preparing to hold a banquet to invite renowned cultivators from Dongzhou. Some of them may have special interests. So let our disciples search for, serve, and spoil in remote places. Wang Laohan felt the silence above his head and quickly continued, I just asked you to entertain the distinguished guests once or twice. After the matter is over, if you have spiritual roots, you will be accepted as disciples from outside the sect. If not, you will also be assigned to disciples in the sect as considerate people. It's also good. How could it all be a step up to heaven? After I finish speaking, don't fight. After hearing this, Gu Si's face turned completely cold, and his blood-stained hand clenched, igniting a raging anger in his heart. Pet attendants. Even when I was pierced by 1,000 swords, I didn't feel so humiliated. Qingyun sect, great. He was just wondering why this apprenticeship was different from his previous life, and he didn't expect the truth to be so absurd. For the sake of the so-called distinguished guests, how could a large gate become a brothel, madam? Ye Changhuan understood and said, no wonder Uncle Wang is so convinced that my good days are ahead, but he didn't know that I was going to be someone's attendant pet. However, Uncle Wang has been wandering in the land of fireworks, so he should know how cruel the methods of guests with hobbies are. It is rare for the attendant pet to survive, let alone that I am still a mortal and the other person is a cultivator. Uncle Wang, you have also benefited a lot from those cultivators, haven't you? She lightly patted Mr. Wang's face and saw him in extreme fear, sighing. You guys are really damn it. The old man Wang shuddered and begged for mercy. Ye Changhuan had already stood up and walked out, and he looked up at Gu Si's cold eyes. A suffocating sensation hit his neck, and his eyes were wide open. When Gu Sixi walked out of the door, Ye Changhuan was washing away the bloodstains on her hands with the rainwater from the stone trough. When she heard the sound, she smiled and curled her lips. Well done. The cold-hearted and cold-blooded Tian Sha Lone Star is truly extraordinary, with astonishing methods at a young age. It seems that Ye Changhuan in the original work is also a ruthless person, and such characters can be influenced to treat her as a biological sister and sacrifice her life for her. However, Ye Changhuan is not the female protagonist of the original work. She is a businessman who values profits and cannot influence others. Isn't it convenient to use her like this now? Don't you pity him? Gu Si asked instinctively, seeing her face indifferent. In his past life, he always avoided Ye Changhuan when he killed people, because Ye Changhuan had a natural talent for sympathizing with others and disliked the smell of blood the most. When he saw it, he begged him to release him. You should know that the other party wants to put him to death. He's crazy if he lets go, but Ye Changhuan is actually a family member he admits to, so he always brings people outside to kill when he finds trouble, and only comes back after killing them. Poor. What should be pitiful now is that you and I are about to be sent to bed and become someone else's plaything. The night is just right, and it's raining heavily. It's best to run, but my small body is a burden. You don't want to leave me running at night, do you? What should I do then? Ye Changhuan looked at Gu Sixi in shock as she spoke. Feeling heartbroken, Gu Sixi said, I have no cultivation in my body, and I have even made a vow. Gu Sishan, you want me to die? He couldn't hear the intentional guidance of the person in front of him. What are you talking about, younger brother? Sister doesn't have that idea, Ye Changhuan said shyly, but if Di really dares to leave her sister behind and run away, she will definitely be the first to report and ensure that Di dies completely. After all, she can keep her promise to bring people safely into the immortal gate to fulfill Gu Mu's last wish, but she will not accept the betrayed dog. Gu Si was coldly affected by the sound of his younger sister. Gu Sishan, you weren't like this before. Auntie has passed away, and no one is watching me pretend to be virtuous and kind. Gu Sixi's eloquence, kindness, and understanding were not met with any hesitation, and he spoke coldly. I will take you away without testing me. Ye Changhuan's face lit up with joy in an instant. Di, you're really kind. Let's talk about how to kill those turtles and grandchildren. Chapter 6. Begging Me. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Early the next morning, the cultivators who arrived were eager to take Ye Changhuan and others on their way. Wang Laohan often drank alcohol and caused trouble. He did not come to see him off, but it did not arouse suspicion from others. These cultivators would not pay attention to a mortal. Lian went to approach the cultivator in the middle of the night, but he didn't know what he heard. He changed his previous pride and his face looked a bit ugly. The leading cultivator's name was Zhou Huai. He took out a flying boat and walked up with a few people. Along the way, he encountered many flying boats of the same type, and on the way, he also encountered mortals found by disciples from other places and delivered them to this place. In theory, they all came from remote and impoverished areas. Coupled with the floods, everyone was disheveled, except for the young man who finally boarded the ship, dressed in black clothes, with immature eyebrows and eyes but a sense of pampering pride. He didn't look embarrassed at all, which made Ye Changhuan, who was playing a deep brother-in-law relationship with Gu Sixi, look up. Zhou Huai's attitude towards him was completely different from others. He was respectful all the way and vaguely knew that this young master's surname was Chu. Gu Sixi pondered for a moment and realized that in his previous life, he had never encountered this number one person. Chu Xiao, there are already prepared rooms inside. If you need anything, just give orders, Zhou Huai flattered. The young man, with a cold face and a sword in his arms, ignored Zhou Huai's advances and looked around everyone. Finally, when he saw Ye Changhuan, he paused for a moment and walked over under the gaze of everyone. He only meditated on the spot 1 meter away from her, completely closing his eyes. All of this is done for granted, so that life does not have the illusion of who he stays for. Like a lone swordsman. Zhou Huai saw a slightly fierce expression on his face. What kind of mischievous young master are these? If it weren't for the orders from above to treat him well, he wouldn't be too lazy to warm his face and touch his cold buttocks. However, although he didn't mention his identity, it's always right for him to be careful. Just follow him. The Qingyun Sect's banquet will be held 2 days later, so don't give birth to any tricks. Listen up, I'll land in Shanxia tonight and arrive at Qingyun Sect in 3 days. The people on the boat must not cause trouble. Otherwise, you guys will look good. Who is it? Is it so grand? The girl beside Lian secretly glanced at the boy meditating. It's just the glory of our ancestors, Lian said with jealousy. It's really unfair. Although he's not inferior to these people, which one here isn't 100 times more luxurious than him these days. Immortals Sect disciple, what's so remarkable? One day, he will definitely step on these people under his feet. Thinking of this, he remembered the words he had overheard that night, and a hint of determination flashed in his eyes. Looking at someone who is about your age, looking at their imposing demeanor, and then looking at you, like a drowning dog, Ye Changhuan joked as he continued to stab his cheap younger brother, who had no blood relationship with him. Gu Si was disgusted and still held a piece of broken carbon in his hand, writing something. It's a pity that you can't replace each other yet, only someone like me. Ye Changhuan. How do you know that I haven't raised any other offspring? The boy's eyelashes twitched slightly while meditating. Gu Sixi showed no interest in this and said, what does that have to do with me? That's right. Ye Changhuan smiled at the words and blinked at Gu Si, saying, the rest of us are white-eyed wolves. It's better if you don't like me, my younger brother. Gu Sixi still didn't fall for it and sneered, clever words and charming expressions. These days, he has seen that the woman in front of him is no longer hypocritical, and she has become even more shameless and shameless. She can barely find half of the truth out of her 10 words. If someone takes her words seriously, her bones can be eaten to the bone. Neither of them noticed the young man sitting beside him holding his hand tightly. However, Ye Changhuan seemed to have a strong interest in Gu Si's evil and continued, oh my, don't be angry, can't even praise be enough. Aren't you jealous? Brother. little evil. Gu gu. Gu Sishan. Gu Sishan gritted his teeth as he saw her speaking less and less, self-respect. Ye Changhuan was taken aback for a moment, and tears seemed to flash in her eyes. Are you mean to me? You're making noise, she said. A lowly person, but he trembled with force. Sishan, how could you still allow him to treat you like this? Now that you are about to enter the immortal sect, this kind of person is not worthy of you. Lian, who was already irritable, heard the two of them speak harshly. He can't afford to provoke the people on this ship, but what's wrong with Gu Si? Just take it out of him. You should know that Gu Sishan first saw her beautiful appearance when she grew up in the village at a young age. It was a waste of time for such a beautiful woman to be a disaster star. Brethren, don't say that. He didn't mean to be so evil. Ye Changhuan's eyes flashed with sadness and he whispered softly. This pretentious appearance made Gu Si's forehead and veins bulge, and he said coldly, is there any way she wants to follow me? I didn't let her cling to me. If you can't stand it, let her go with you. Why not let her follow you? Don't you want to? Lian, who heard the mockery, stood up angrily and said, you disaster star. Bastard. Gu Si had no trace of anger on his face. He looked up and down at him and casually uttered two words. You coward. Li An's anger was suddenly ignited in his heart. The coldness and blow he had received these days could be looked down upon by anyone, but what is Gu Si evil? Tian Sha Lone Star, a lowly seed. He doesn't deserve it. Lian didn't even hesitate and punched Gu Sixi down. The two of them twisted together in an instant, and Ye Changhuan stood on the side stomping his feet. Don't fight anymore. Don't fight anymore. There was a lot of commotion, and Zhou Huai arrived almost in no time. Ye Changhuan quickly grabbed Gu Sixi's arm and said, stop fighting. However, when the latter saw it was her, his face became even colder and he immediately shook her off, just being helped by Zhou Huai. What are you doing? You don't want to live anymore, do you? Zhou Huai's face was gloomy. After all, these are lowly attendants and pets. I don't know how many will live after the banquet. He knows they will die, but it's not on the cloud boat. It's not cost-effective to have so many. He moved his hand first. Noisy. Zhou Huai slapped Lian across the air and said coldly, when will it be your turn to speak on your own here? It doesn't matter who is right or wrong to him, who provokes his reputation is the first. Lian was suffocated by the pressure of the foundation construction period, and his unwillingness grew heavier and heavier in his heart. It's my fault, my younger brother, because I had an argument with brethren, Ye Changhuan whispered. Humph, they're all cheap bones. Zhou Huai sneered, put them all in the torture room for me. After speaking, he slapped Gu Sixi in the heart and saw that the other party had vomited a mouthful of blood before leaving satisfied. No matter who is right or wrong, creating trouble for him is always wrong. For a moment, the person who had been feeling a bit restless on the cloud boat these past few days suddenly calmed down. Only the boy who was meditating opened his eyes when Ye Changhuan and others were taken away, with a gloomy expression that did not match his age. He stared at Ye Changhuan's back, his tone indistinguishable from joy and anger. Teacher. Ye Changhuan, is that you? Ye Changhuan, who pretended to be pitiful and was locked in a violent room with Gu Sixi, expressed his gratitude to the monk AI, saying, thank you very much, Immortal. My younger brother was mischievous when he was young, and his brain was kicked by a donkey. Since then, he has been weak and unable to take care of himself. If I don't take care of him, he will definitely cause trouble for the Immortals. Gu Si, whose brain had been kicked by a donkey, said, The next second I saw someone leave, my pitiful and delicate eyes instantly turned into nothing. Watching the host's entire face-changing system. It's so scary. It has truly witnessed the extent to which this host can bend and stretch. Artificial intelligence has never been an emotional primate. After calculating its brain data, it is better not to tell Ye Changhuan about one of the male leads appearing here. Will the male lead regret not caring, but he knows that Ye Changhuan will never listen and walk the plot well. Did you get it? Gu Si saw no one around and asked. It's just a matter of holding hands, how could sister let you get slapped for nothing? Ye Changhuan spread out her hand, with a jade stone in her palm that carried a hint of spiritual energy. Gu Si didn't agree with this and took out the crumpled paper from his arms. There were 2 talismans drawn with black charcoal on it, one was an amplification note and the other was the most basic explosive note. To what extent did it explode? The sound is 10 times louder than firecrackers, with no power at all. The picture shows a loud and explosive presence that belongs to the rune paper attack category. However, if it is not so useless, they can't draw them. These charms are not difficult for ordinary people to spend some time on, so Gu Xiao knows that it will not surprise Ye Changhuan. The only limit is that they need a spirit stone to inject spirit qi. Ye Changhuan and Gu Xiao are so poor that they haven't eaten for 2 days, let alone a spirit stone worth 100 liang in the eyes of ordinary people. So the 2 of them combined and focused on the jade pendant hanging all over Zhou Huai's waist. It wasn't a regular spirit stone, but it had some spiritual energy, enough to activate the talisman paper. At that time, there will be chaos and escape from the heavens, within reach. Is this your plan? The storm room instantly quieted down. The 2 of them, who were originally in a relaxed atmosphere, changed their faces slightly and looked at the door. At some point, a young man holding a sword appeared indoors. Only during the transitional period can one pass through the wall. But the youth is obviously not, so there is only one possibility, the formation. The formation is several times more cumbersome than talismans, and using it in such a way is simply overusing one's abilities. The 2 of them, from wealthy to poor, feel a bit jealous. Are you? Ye Changhuan raised his hand and pressed it on Gu Sixi's shoulder, preventing him from approaching, and asked with a smile. My surname is Chu, my name is Xian. Chu Xian spoke. Ignoring Ye Changhuan's probing. Actually, you have another way to escape. Ye Changhuan followed suit and said, which one? Chu Xian raised his eyes and spoke in an indifferent tone. Please me. Chapter 7. Just Playthings. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What? Ye Changhuan couldn't hear clearly. Chu Xian repeated, please me. As long as you ask me, I can help you leave here. Ye Chang laughed happily and said, why is this? Chu Xian nodded, with no emotion between his eyebrows and eyes. Just a plaything. This is in line with his image, as a wealthy and noble young master who is above all else. It seems that nothing in the world can enter his eyes, so it is nothing more than a plaything. Ye Changhuan said, what if I don't want to? Chu Xian said, you should know that if you go, you will become a lowly servant pet and won't survive for a night. And their methods are too shabby. Even if Chu Xian didn't say anything, there was a hint of disdain in their words. Ye Changhuan pondered, why didn't you mention my younger brother? Gu Sixi originally watched coldly and his expression froze upon hearing the words. Chu Xian had a rare expression and frowned, I won't save you. I don't need anyone else to save me, Gu Sishan sneered and stepped away from Ye Changhuan's hand resting on his shoulder. Gu Sishan, you ask people not to take me with you. Ye Changhuan nodded and said, if you don't ask, then I won't ask either. Gu Sixi said, Ye Changhuan didn't even notice his reaction and said to Chu Xian. This immortal, thank you for reminding me. However, my younger brother has a high heart. As a sister, I cannot help but spoil her. Although I want to climb up the high branch, I cannot kneel down and beg for help. I can only decline with tears in my eyes. I hope for your understanding. Chu Xian's eyes widened slightly and he said, how dare you give up for him? Gu Sixi. Fool. This woman is clearly unwilling to seek help from others and doesn't want to offend others, so she just wants someone to take the blame. The jade pendant and talisman paper at Ye Changhuan's fingertips flew out with a smile, who made me only have such a little brother. After speaking, he didn't forget to apply eye drops to Gu Sixi and said, "Brother, don't say that sister doesn't have you in her heart. Sister has sacrificed too much for you this time." Gu Si couldn't help but say, "You fart." The next second, the talisman landed, and a huge explosion sounded. Ye Changhuan and Gu Sixi had already stuffed cotton, but Chu Xian, who was very close, was deafened by the huge sound. If it were a mortal, it would surely bleed from his 7 orifices. The system was stunned and said, "Host, why are you so ruthless? That's the male lead." Ye Changhuan pulled Gu Sixi and ran away, sneering. "Just a plaything. I just heard the whole process of Chu Xian or Yi Ming talking to Ye Changhuan's system. It cannot refute. It is only natural for the female protagonist in the cruel text to be insulted by such language. They are all so obedient, and even if they dig their eyes and kidneys, no one will resist. The host is also too cautious." The sound of the explosive symbol was loud, and in an instant, every corner of the cloud boat could hear the sound. However, due to the loud sound in the wide coverage area, it was impossible to find the source for a moment. At this moment, a crumpled talisman floated towards the center of the cloud boat, and a male and female indistinguishable voice immediately sounded. Under the guise of accepting disciples, Qingyun Sect selected attendants and favored guests for the banquet of the 10,000 Immortals Alliance. Under the guise of accepting disciples, Qingyun Sect selected attendants and favored guests for the banquet of the 10,000 Immortals Alliance. Under the guise of accepting disciples, Qingyun Sect selected attendants and favored guests for the banquet of the 10,000 Immortals Alliance. The sound was repeated time and time again, and it was heard from 2 miles outside of Yunzhou. The person who was originally selected turned pale in an instant. "Go and find out. Look who doesn't want to live and dare to miss the Qingyun Sect event. Catch him. I want to make him a swine. Cut out his eyes and ears and feed them to the dog." Zhou Huai came out of the room, dressed in disheveled clothes and roaring angrily. It was the woman who was still surrounded by Lian today who came out with him, her face still flushed. He is actually a cultivator with many techniques, but at first he was a bit flustered, but soon it was discovered. It's the explosive and amplification notes, the escaped siblings surnamed Gu. Zhou Huai remembered that although the siblings looked different, they were both extremely outstanding. He had originally planned to use these 2 people to make the distinguished guests happy and become an inner disciple, but was unexpectedly pecked in the eye by an eagle. Now that the situation has been exposed, there are many cultivators coming to attend the banquet, and I don't know how many people heard it just now. They can't hide it at all. The sect leader will definitely kill him. Hurry up and find him. He wants to live. It's okay if he breaks his leg or hand, as long as he lives. Only the living can divert his anger. For a moment, all the disciples on the cloud boat of Qingyun's sect were mobilized. But they despise 2 people, one is an old fogey, the other is reborn. Although they are still mortal now, if they are easily caught by a group of builders, that is a big joke. What's more, they have already planned to run when the cloud boat stops in the most prosperous Zhangcheng, just like looking for a needle in a haystack. Zhou Huai hurriedly walked towards the room where Ye Changhuan and Gu Si were being held captive. Just as he was about to get angry, he saw a straight figure standing there with a cold face. "Chu, young Master Chu. Everyone has run away," Yi Ming said. "Am I going to pursue him now?" Zhou Huai couldn't determine the young master's attitude for a moment. He only knew that this young master had a very high status, so he thought he was from a certain powerful bloodline. "Chase and chase, what's the use of asking me?" Yi Ming said coldly, "Even if she dies, it has nothing to do with me. Zhangcheng is a bustling mortal city in Dongzhou. Although there are not many cultivators, there are also many. Ye Changhuan and Gu Sixi fled all the way and hid in the crowd, watching the cultivators hurriedly flying with swords in the sky, indifferent. But the system finally reacted. Warning, warning. Do not disrupt the plot, please join the Immortals sect within tomorrow. Otherwise, the host will be punished by 10 heavenly thunders. Ye Changhuan said, my body is now fully ripe after 10 cuts. The sound of the system is cold. The host can rest assured and loop until the outcome is achieved. Upon hearing this, Ye Changhuan's playful face showed a rare hint of irritability, and the fierce aura that flashed through her eyes made people shiver. Even Gu Sixi keenly turned his head to look at her. What's wrong? Ye Chang asked with a happy smile. That was a beautiful face, as if anyone could see their favorite side on it, but Gu Si knew it was just a disguise, and he didn't forget how he died. I have sworn to protect you from entering the Immortal sect, but now Qingyun's sect can no longer go. Besides, he also needs a sect to start cultivation. With the accumulation of the previous life, his cultivation speed will only be faster in this life. Qingyun sect belongs to the first major sect in Dongzhou, which is also known as the wilderness land, in the world of cultivating immortals. With weak spiritual energy, it is impossible to cultivate a second sect that can be on par with it. The rest are just miscellaneous cards, such as the 10,000 Immortals Alliance. Looking at the gathering of heroes from afar and the carrot meeting from afar, it is better to worship a pig if you go there. Ye Changhuan talked confidently, and Gu Sixi knew it was reasonable, but if they didn't deal with each other, he choked, if you demote the Dongzhou sect to nothing, you will find a better place to go. That's nature. Where? Zhongzhou. Ye Changhuan saw that he was silent and asked, how about it? Zhongzhou is located in the center of the mainland, connecting the 4 states. It is like spring all year round. Unlike Penglai, Fangzhong, and Ningzhou, which are isolated and hidden in the sea, cultivators of immortals tend to indulge in spiritual cultivation, although there are those who seek pleasure. Therefore, Zhongzhou is prosperous, but it is not conducive to cultivators to concentrate on cultivation, making it the most common place for ordinary people. Moreover, due to its connection with the other 4 states, Zhongzhou has become a central hub, with a mix of fish and dragons. There are often cultivators from all over here, and the rules are many and difficult to follow. For people like Ye Changhuan and Gu Sixi who have offended the major sects, it is indeed a good place to go. Gu Sixi also had this plan. Speaking of which, the two of them always had a rare understanding in some strange places. Okay, we'll set off in 3 days. After the banquet ends in 3 days, the people looking for them will also relax. The two reached an agreement. Because I was afraid of revealing my identity, I walked through remote alleys, so I heard a commotion and faintly felt the spiritual fluctuations of the cultivator, instantly becoming alert. Old thing. This is also something you can stop. Get lost. Don't hit my grandfather. Don't hit him. At the corner of the alley, 2 monks sat aside laughing and kicked an old man to the ground. The old man's beard and hair were all white, and his clothes were sewn and patched. The wrinkles of his old age made his face look like a groove, and his eyelids drooped almost covering his eyes. Because he was too old, every move trembled and he was kicked weak and groaned before quickly getting up and kneeling down. Holding both hands, he kowtowed and begged, please spare your life, 2 immortals. My daughter is only 13, and there is absolutely no such fate. The old man begged for mercy from the 2 immortals, please forgive me. Grandfather. The girl cried with red eyes and a face full of despair. The 2 cultivators sat comfortably as the old man kowtowed and knelt. One of them smiled and said, Old man, I have a way to make your granddaughter not go. Come over and I'll tell you. The old man, upon hearing this, had no courage to refuse. He crawled up to the monk and said, Immortals, immortals. The next second, he was kicked out by the cultivator and spat out a mouthful of blood. Ha ha ha, old fool, stupid to death, I've been fooled every time. Dare to refuse, don't be shameless. What if I kill you? The elderly person collapses on the ground with more intake and less output. Chapter 8. The Death of Ants. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. What Ye Changhuan and Gu Sixi saw was this scene. The fact that Dongzhou is known as a barbaric land is not unfounded. Because of the lack of spiritual energy, there is only one major sect, and the rest are all a mixed group of people, each occupying their own territory like bandits occupying a king. Therefore, those who have received the least education from immortals, according to the rules of the cultivation world, the strong are respected, and killing should not bear karmic debts. However, ordinary people are powerless and bound by the heavenly way. Immortals should never touch the blood of ordinary people too much, fearing to bear karmic debts and hinder the path to immortality. If you really want to kill mortals, you are also instigating them to do so that you can end up clean. But the disciples of these miscellaneous sects did not originally cultivate for the purpose of becoming immortals, and they killed without any fear, such as now. This Qingyun sect is hosting a banquet to invite cultivators from all directions, searching for beauties everywhere, hoping to make this distinguished guest interested in them. This will greatly benefit everyone. Even if that distinguished guest doesn't like it, there will be many rewards for other distinguished guests who do. I see that your granddaughter looks good, so I am praising her. Don't be ignorant of the good or bad. No, stop fighting. I'll go with you. Stop fighting. The girl's face was full of despair. She was only a half-year-old girl, but she also heard that the benefactors in the brothel often killed the singer, and there should be no way for her to survive. Nan, I am a girl from the Yang family. I will never be a concubine or a prostitute. The old man coughed up blood and murmured hoarsely. The girl's tears grew even more. How could she not know that a prostitute's identity was lowly, and her dealings were not as good as those of pigs and dogs? But what could she do? She's just an ordinary person, what can she do? On the path of cultivating immortals, it is said that immortals are merciful and compassionate. Why did she encounter a situation where animals are not as good as animals? The anger in her heart soared, but in reality, she was caught by the wrist. You look really good. What's your name? Don't worry, just your beauty will definitely make you soar. Don't forget us two benefactors when the time comes. Willows. The voice is gentle. The old man closed his eyes in despair. It's really him who's useless. He's an old bone, useless. Seeing Yang Lu's attitude like this, the cultivator smiled and said to the other person, kill it. Yang Lu widened her eyes and said, you clearly said you would release my grandfather. Just playing with the dog, how do you feel that you are qualified to negotiate terms with us? Look, I still pity you for your current appearance. Keep it up, and when I give you a deadly pill, what can't you agree to as an antidote? Why do you need a dead old man? After speaking, the other cultivator has already activated his spiritual energy. No. Grandfather. Yang Lu was held tightly and couldn't break free. The monk wrapped around her waist and laughed obscene. Even though her cries echoed through the alley, not a single household opened the door to take a look. The silence around was terrifying. Unfortunately, at this moment, a gust of strong wind struck, and the cultivator's hand, who was only about to take action, was cut off on the ground. A scream suddenly rang out. Who is so bold? Bold. A voice came from above everyone's heads, and at some point, Zhou Huai, with a black face, wielded his sword in mid-air, staring at the two cultivators with death. The people of Qingyun sect. The monk's voice trembled and he said, Sir, please spare your life. Stop talking nonsense, where did you two hide those two siblings? Zhou Huai asked in a voice. What siblings? You dare to argue, if you don't know each other, what is this? Zhou Huai raised his hand and grabbed, revealing half a broken talisman paper on the cultivator's body, along with fragments of the jade pendant he was wearing with him. Zhou Huai was furious and wished he could immediately find someone to dismember him. Unexpectedly, someone dared to ignore the authority of the Qingyun sect and hide it privately. "No, sir, we haven't seen any siblings before, it must be a misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. Zhou Huai squinted his eyes and looked at the willows and the old man on the ground. What else was there that he didn't understand? The disciples of these small sects always pleased Qingyun sect. These two people may not have been fooled by their superior appearance, but they looked at those two siblings and hid them to take credit for him. "I have no choice but for you to take the people away from me, torture them severely until you spit out the news. At the same time, add more manpower and bring them back to me." The talisman paper and jade pendant fragments are on these two people, and he doesn't believe it and can't ask for any information. The two mortals still want to turn the world upside down. A group of people came fiercely and disappeared without a trace after a moment. If Zhou Huai had been in the mood to pay attention to the beauty of willows in his daily life, now he was as anxious as ants on a hot pot, and could not care about anything. "Grandfather, grandfather." Yang Lu regained consciousness and quickly helped the old man up, but unfortunately he was already on the verge of death. Time is also destiny. The old man sighed sadly and said, "Girl, this is the fate of mortals. Grandfather, I can't accompany you anymore." "No, grandfather." Yang Lu cried. "If you keep restraining him, he won't even be able to finish his last words and he will die." In the darkness, a petite figure slowly walked out. The girl's face was full of childishness, but her tone was extremely mature. Yang Lu was almost certain. "Benefactor, save my grandfather. You were able to save me just now, please also save him." Yang Lu is willing to serve as a servant and serve as a servant for the benefactor for a lifetime. Ye Changhuan said, if it were in the Immortal sect, a simple qi-gathering pill could save him, but now we are both ordinary people. Yang Lu was shocked. Just as she was stunned, the old man struggled to fall to the ground, firmly refusing the support of the willows. He knelt down towards Ye Changhuan and couldn't stop kowtowing. For each kowtow, he repeated. After the old man's death, the girl became helpless and begged for mercy from the benefactor. It would be great if he could take the girl and make her a servant who would cook by fire. Help the girl. The old man is willing to die without being a burden. How could he not know that he was advancing and that the other party was doing everything in their power to save him? However, he was at a loss. Although the person in front of him looked childish, he didn't seem like an ordinary person. This was his only chance to save a girl. He could only be a villain with despicable intentions. After he finished speaking, he hardly gave anyone a chance to react. His head was covered in blood and he crashed into the wall, killing himself on the spot. Ye Changhuan took a step back and rarely frowned. Yang Lu was taken aback for a moment. The mournful cries pierced through the night. The legends of young talents in the cultivation world, whether they are angry with their crowns, or have the ambition to slaughter the entire sect overnight, or have a sudden enlightenment while lying drunk in the sword pavilion, are everywhere. However, this has nothing to do with ordinary people. They die silently, like a small speck of dust in 1,000 worlds. Gu Si dug a hole with a stench on his face and said, "I've said, once saved, there will be endless trouble. Don't forget who is still wanted across the East continent." Ye Changhuan looked at the willow tree that had fainted from crying in front of the grave, feeling a bit overwhelmed. If you don't want to save it, how could you cause trouble to flow eastward? Gu Sixi, when you saw that old man, you thought of your mother, right? She had a shallow impression of her mother Gu, who passed away after only 2 days of being reborn. She treated her well, but it is unknown how much of it was planned for her own son. According to reason, Gu Si is evil and a lone star in the sky. She should have resented this son for causing him to lose her husband and family, but even in death, she held Ye Changhuan's hand tightly. "I know you don't want to be my daughter. Law, I just beg you to treat him well. Considering that I have also nurtured you for so many years, if you are afraid of him, you can stay far away from him. But if you really can't live anymore, I beg you, my mother, to give him a bite to eat." Only one scene, she remembers the unexpected clarity. Gu Si stopped talking even after hearing the words. She should have spiritual roots. One burden is a burden, and two burdens are also burdens. Let's pack them together and go to Dongzhou. Ye Changhuan didn't stab him either and made a decision by slapping his thigh. The system finally couldn't help but say, "Host, don't forget that if you don't go to Qingyun sect, you will be punished." Ye Changhuan said leisurely, "If Qingyun sect goes, it will be a death. Why can't I adapt?" The system fell silent for a while, and the voice was very cold. "Are you trying to modify the plot?" "Impossible. If the plot collapses, the headquarters will definitely discover that it will be labeled as a failure and crushed into garbage. It absolutely does not allow anyone to attempt to modify the plot. I'm just trying to survive, and this small plot change won't affect anything. Cultivating immortality. In cultivating immortality, where is not cultivation?" Ye Changhuan was innocent. But the system stopped talking, as if it had completely disappeared. It doesn't believe it at all. This person may have been deceiving it from the beginning. Ye Changhuan doesn't pay much attention to its unusual appearance, because she and Gu Sio have been hiding together with willows these 2 days, and during this time, the words on the cloud boat have spread far and wide across Dongzhou, making the Qingyun sect have to face the shame, releasing the beauties who want to leave one after another, and they were wanted overnight. The reward is not only for miraculous elixirs, but also for promising positions for inner disciples. Ye Changhuan looked quite tempted, but unfortunately she was the one wanted. However, it has to be said that Qingyun sect used profit to drive them away. At that time, Dongzhou was full of dangers, and every pair of eyes was a disaster for them. It seems that we can only leave after the banquet of the 10,000 Immortals alliance is over. The only thing that pleased her was that Yang Lu was extremely worry-free. After waking up, she didn't speak again, and because she had just experienced a big downturn, she was completely confused. Occasionally, she would look at a place and be lost in thought, not asking about their plans. She looked like she was letting them go, sitting there all day. The three of them were hiding in a secluded thatched cottage in the east of the city. It was already the 3rd day, and the banquet had already begun. After that day, they could leave Dongzhou. Ye Changhuan and Gu Sixi went out last night to inquire about the situation, while Yang Lu still sat by the window with a blank expression. Suddenly, a mechanical sound came from my ear. "Do you want revenge?" Chapter 9. If you don't explode in silence, you will become abnormal in silence. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. It was night, and Ye Changhuan looked at Sangchen, which was obviously missing many people, without hesitation, pulling the other 2 people to wrap themselves in the crowd. "Goodbye, Dongzhou." Ye Changhuan raised the corners of her mouth, with a hint of malice in her eyes. Ye Changhuan has been struggling in the mall for many years, having been humble and influential, but she has never been led by anyone. What a ridiculous plot. I want her to give in to a few dog men, digging her heart and lungs, dreaming. You can't leave. The mechanical sound reappeared after 3 days. Ye Changhuan's expression turned cold. The contradiction of one person, one unification suddenly sharpened. The system instantly confirmed. Please do not attempt to disrupt the plot. Due to the host's violation of regulations, punishment will be activated. Do you really want to chop me to death? Ye Changhuan instinctively looked at the sky and froze. There were no thunder in the sky, but there were many black spots from far to near. The cultivator's sword flew and gusts of strong winds blew. Gu Sixi was instantly alert. Let's go quickly. It can't leave. Gu Si hesitated and narrowed his eyes. It was not Ye Changhuan who answered him. He looked for a voice, but it was Yang Lu's wooden and pale face. Gu Si's evil eyes were filled with murderous intent, and he gritted his teeth. It was you who told the secret. Those who can't run away, resist less and suffer less. Yang Lu looked at him indifferently, without any fear. Get out of here. Gu Sixi angrily scolded, thinking of something and shouting, Gu Sishan. As soon as the words were spoken, 2 iron hooks immediately rushed towards the crowd, one hitting Gu Si's evil peepa bone. The hook hooked on the bone, causing a piercing pain with just a slight movement. Gu Si's evil expression completely changed, and a picture that had already become a nightmare flashed in his mind. At that time, he had already become one of the outstanding young people in the cultivation world, and no one dared to mention his humble past. However, one day, he was tied to the heavenly pillar of the Feast of the Immortals, with 2 iron hooks hooked onto his peepa bone, like a dead dog, being watched by people all over the world. Kill. Kill. His eyes blushed faintly. And in the other hook, it was Ye Changhuan at the other end of the crowd. The 3 of them were originally scattered among the crowd to hide, but now the other party's actions clearly knew their position long ago, and Ye Changhuan's left arm was instantly penetrated. The sound of machinery is cold and ruthless. Punishment is activated in the Lord's mansion of Changqing City. Ye Changhuan was led by someone like a livestock through the Changting. Finally, she took a deep look at the willows in the crowd. Suddenly eliciting a smile, gently opening her mouth like water. Hide well, I will definitely crush your bones, pull out your skin, dig out your heart, and feed it to wild dogs. Dogs love to eat dirty things. The originally indifferent Yang Lu's face stiffened, and her back was completely cold. The still cold expression on his face said, People are not for themselves, heaven and earth will perish. It was you and your brother who wanted to save me, and I didn't beg you. If you want to blame me, I'll blame you for meddling. If you don't have enough strength, you have to save another person. This is your fault. If you don't accept it, you can come to me later to settle accounts. From now on, she will become a disciple of the Qingyun sect's inner sect. She is no longer an ordinary person, like these people, from heaven to earth. What else does she need to fear? Moreover, today, they simply cannot survive. The first time Ye Changhuan was so angry, her anger surged in her heart, and she was directly laughed at. I will definitely kill you. Definitely. What nonsense. Keep up. Bitch. Zhou Huai pulled the iron chain fiercely, causing Ye Changhuan's flesh and blood to ache. You 2 despicable people have caused a big trouble this time, causing Qingyun sect to be laughed at by all the cultivators in Dongzhou. In order to catch you, the sect leader killed you in front of all the cultivators in Dongzhou and even set up a banquet in Changcheng. It can be considered that your ancestors' graves are smoking. Young Master Chu. What's wrong with you? Zhou Huai looked at the young man with a sword suddenly appearing in surprise, saying it was a sword, but no one saw the true appearance of the sword body. Even the scabbard was tightly wrapped in black cloth, indicating that he was a sword enthusiast, so well protected. Ye Changhuan's gaze shifted from her flesh and blood-drenched arm. Yi Ming frowned as he watched her covered in blood, feeling inexplicably agitated. What was going on? He had never regretted killing Ye Changhuan and cutting off her inner elixir. Finding her a body was a clear reconciliation between him and her. He had never told a third person about this matter. For some unknown reason, since Ye Changhuan's death, he has always been unable to concentrate on his cultivation and often experiences nightmares. He believes that this is because he has been holding on to the inner demons left by Ye Changhuan, a useless disciple, over the years, which has led him to come to Dongzhou. He asked Ye Changhuan to kneel down and beg him, which ended his evil heart. Young Master Chu, are you also here to watch the excitement? Ye Changhuan still smiled. Can you still laugh out of such a heavy injury? She really doesn't know what to do. Sure enough, it's completely incomparable to the grandeur of Chang'e. Yi Ming felt an unnamed anger in his heart, with nowhere to vent it. He said coldly, "You have caused the Qingyun sect to lose face this time, and there is no doubt that you will die." Ye Changhuan said, "How should I survive? Kneel down and beg the young master of Chu." Yi Ming's tone softened slightly upon hearing this. "Please beg me, I'll save your life for now." "That won't do." Yi Chang laughed happily. "Why?" "Because I am a supporting brother demon. What? Yi Ming didn't know, but he vaguely knew something about that younger brother, and it was because of that man. Yi Ming was so angry that his face was slightly grim. "Yi Gu Sishan, you wouldn't die without a man, would you? Just watch, there will be a time when you beg me later." Ye Changhuan is the most lazy and indulgent person. Although she eats soft and doesn't eat hard, she cherishes her life the most. He doesn't believe that she can still be so carefree when her life is hanging on the line for a while. System. If the host doesn't want to continue being punished, it's best to listen to him. Ye Changhuan said, "He loves me so much. If I beg him, are you sure he will let me stay in Qingyun sect instead of binding me to his side?" There are too many elements in this statement, and the system CPU burned up for a while. I don't know which point to refute. It's not surprising that Ye Changhuan didn't have any doubts about Yi Ming's identity, but rather that she knew too well about those three people, the proud son of heaven, who relied on talent and arrogance. How could she disguise herself as a young boy and travel thousands of miles to this remote and impoverished Dongzhou for her? In her eyes, the current Yi Ming was just a spoiled bear child Chu Xian by her family. When she was at the peak of her strength, a punch could make him cry for a long time. "You really don't know what to do." Watching Yi Ming run away with anger from Ye Changhuan, Zhou Huai spoke with jealousy. He had no idea before, but only found out yesterday that this young master of Chu was the kind of person who would be called young master in a low voice by this distinguished guest. What kind of arrogance can one be attracted to someone like this? The immortal is right, I have suffered a lot for it. Ye Changhuan regretted deeply. But not changed. Zhou Huai saw that she was angry and the attitude of the nobles towards her had become even worse. He led Ye Changhuan to the banquet. The flood disaster that occurred in Dongzhou did not prevent Qingyun sect, as the first immortal sect in Dongzhou, from hosting banquets to promote its achievements despite its delayed arrival for disaster relief. The number of cultivators invited this time is countless, and various sects are mixed with fish and dogs, giving themselves a gilded title. Also known as the Banquet of the 10,000 Immortals Alliance. When Ye Changhuan lifted her eyes, she saw a young man on the stone pillar in the center of the banquet, with scars all over his body piercing through the pipa bone. His blood gradually dried up along the pillar, leaving behind bright red marks. She suddenly remembered that Gu Si in the original work had suffered great humiliation due to the reputation of the heavenly demon Lone Star, and his self-esteem was extremely strong. Therefore, after entering the path of cultivating immortals, he worked hard to cultivate and climb up, striving to do the best in everything. So much so that, in the end, the way the male protagonists killed him was the most heart-wrenching. They tied him to a banquet of various immortals, which was hundreds of times larger than the current banquet, for 3 days and 3 nights. After being seen clearly by the entire cultivation world, they pierced his heart with 10,000 swords and died in extreme humiliation. At that time, Gu Si was so evil that he probably wanted to die faster than in pain. As if feeling something, the young man looked up and met her gaze, his eyes full of mockery, as if he was extremely pleased with Ye Changhuan's disheveled appearance covered in blood. "Look, Ye Changhuan, you also went to hell with me this time." Chapter 10. The Shame of the 10,000 Immortals Alliance. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ye Changhuan sneered at him and said, "Stupid little brother, it seems that you are not suitable to be a good person at all. The cost is too high." Gu Si's wicked smile stiffened. Unfortunately, both of them are now prisoners, and those present can freely humiliate them. Are these the two daring mortals? If you offend Qingyun sect, it's not enough to die 1,000,000 times. There were voices of discussion around him, and Yiming sat in the guest seat with a cold face. The distinguished guest, who was originally honored as a guest of honor, saw him and immediately respectfully said, "Respected." Finally, he said. "Things are not in Qingyun sect's treasure pavilion. Li Shuquang has closed the door to East Zizeng and has not found them yet." Yiming's expression grew even worse. "Keep looking. He didn't forget this time, it's more important. Qingyun sect is currently in seclusion due to the madness of its leader Li Shu. The leader of this matter is the sect elder Li Yu, whose beard and hair are all white, and his eyebrows and eyes are somewhat harsh. His face is not very good looking, and there is a hint of displeasure in his eyes." He spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe everyone has heard of the rumors circulating in our sect recently. The upright person is arrogant and fabricated recklessly. Today, all the cultivators are present, and I will execute these two main culprits on the spot. I hope you can be a witness and restore the innocence of our Qingyun sect." Elderly raised it. "Where do you need to take action on such goods? Qingyun sect is the largest sect in our eastern continent. How could it be so slandered? These two people deserve to die." At this point, everyone's heart was like a mirror, but it didn't stop them from talking nonsense. For a while, Ye Changhuan and Gu Sixi were ordered to die. Gu Sixi knew this and looked at everything with a sneer. He didn't regret his actions, as Ye Changhuan said. If he really didn't want to save someone, he wouldn't transfer the talisman and broken jade to the cultivator. Suddenly showing kindness, whether it's because of Gu's mother or not, she did everything she did, and there's nothing to regret. The only regret is that she couldn't pull Ye Changhuan's 3 mistresses to die together. As for Ye Changhuan, she owed him in her previous life and had bad luck on her own. "Let's die together." Ye Changhuan sighed at the system as she listened to the insults and said, "Tong, is this your punishment? It seems like you haven't brought the plot back. System. As long as you ask Chu Xian to keep you in Qingyun sect, his identity will not be refused by the Qingyun sect leader, and the plot remains unchanged," Ye Changhuan said, "but I just offended him. He's so arrogant, is it useful to ask him again? The system of hindsight. It is accustomed to Ye Changhuan's behavior of causing trouble to people anytime and anywhere, but it forgets that the highly cold male lead who causes trouble has not yet realized that he can still save the female lead in his crematorium." Ye Changhuan saw it silent, and a hint of mockery flashed in her eyes. However, she smiled and said, "Why don't you listen to my opinion? If I can survive, I'll go to Dongzhou. After all, cultivating immortals is just to push the plot mercilessly, which sect is not good." After a while, the system said, "Remember what you said." Ye Changhuan understood and looked up at Li Yu, saying, "I have objections to what the elder said." The scene fell silent. "Li Yu. Do you have any objections? May I ask what mistakes I made with my younger brother? Spreading rumors casually is a disgrace to my Qingyun sect's reputation." "Are you talking about rumors? Nature. Why did Qingyun sect release half of the men and women they received?" Li Yu's face darkened and he said, "In recent years, Qingyun sect has raised its demands on its disciples. Those who lacked qualifications in the second test were dismissed." "I see, but I am just a rural woman from the mountains. I have seen such a scene there, and seeing a woman come out of the Immortals' room with disheveled clothes is understandable," Ye Changhuan said. Zhou Huai was startled and shouted, "We were in love." Li Yu. This is simply a place without 300 taels of silver. Ye Changhuan smiled gently and said, "So I said it was a misunderstanding. Neither I nor my younger brother intended it, and the original intention was good. As a model of the Dongzhou immortal sect, Qingyun sect cannot kill 2 mortals in front of the cultivators just because of this, can it?" Li Yong's forehead was bulging with veins, and he wished he could lift his finger and crush Ye Changhuan under the stage. However, what the other party said had some truth. He didn't know that he had originally chosen to execute on the day of the banquet to gain power, but in the end, it became an excuse for the other party to save their lives. However, just for a moment, he suddenly smiled and gritted his teeth, saying, "It does make sense. We can't kill now, just two ordinary people. Isn't it easy to kill after the banquet? So what if he does a full set of acting? But if you have indeed made a mistake, I will give you a small punishment and a big warning. If that's not the case, you should kowtow 10 times in front of your fellow Taoists here and say one by one, 'My servant is guilty.' This elder will release you and your younger brother. Speaking of which, he paused and said, 'If you don't want to kowtow this head, you can be safe and sound. Qingyun sect won't hold you accountable afterwards, but your brother needs to keep his life.'" As the words fell, the scene became completely silent. Li Yu saw Ye Changhuan silent, and his smile grew even stronger. He thought he had been the elder of Qingyun sect for many years. Who would dare to embarrass him like this? A mortal, playing some tricks is nothing, he wants to see how she should choose. Li Yu is still the elder of the sect. In the middle stage of Yuan Ying's cultivation, it is evident that Ye Changhuan has spiritual roots. If she were to kowtow, entering the path of immortality in the future would be a complete joke. If she didn't kowtow, her ugly behavior of sacrificing her younger brother for her own life would spread throughout the East in just 2 days, and she would be despised by millions of people. Life is more than death. But Li Yong didn't know that Ye Changhuan had a third way. Yi Ming sat straight, seemingly unintentionally looking at Ye Changhuan. He is waiting for Ye Changhuan to come and beg him. As the daughter of the Penglai sect leader, how could Ye Changhuan endure such humiliation? But when she came to beg him later, he wouldn't immediately agree. Who said she didn't know what was going on? Gu Si laughed at this and said, "It's unnecessary. Ye Changhuan knows the best, is the best at disguising, is hypocritical to the extreme, and is actually selfish inside. How could she kneel down for him? In the previous life, he was pierced by 10,000 swords, but it was not this kind-hearted person who had gold under her knees and was unwilling to give her 3 mistresses mercy, was it? The daughter of the Penglai sect leader doesn't even kneel down as a prominent mistress, let alone an elder of the Qingyun sect." Thinking about overlapping scenes with the previous life, Gu Si felt it was ridiculous, extremely ridiculous. Ye Changhuan didn't pay attention to the expressions on everyone's faces, just looked steadily at Li Yu and said, "Elder, are you serious?" Yi Ming's face stiffened. Li Yu had already gathered his spiritual energy and aimed it at Gu Si evil, saying, "Take it seriously." Yi Chang laughed happily, and Gu Si turned away in disgust, waiting for the ending of being pierced by Wan Jian's heart again. The next second, I heard. Nazhan knelt down to thank the Lord for his generosity. Gu Sixi said, Gu Sixi widened his eyes in astonishment and looked at the people below in disbelief. Not only Gu Sixi, but also Yi Ming, Li Yu, and even most of the cultivators did not expect her to make such a choice. You should know that everyone is selfish. Regardless of the outcome, if Ye Changhuan kneels down, he will be forever nailed to the pillar of shame. As a cultivator, one can never hold their head high. As an ordinary person, no one dares to marry, so as not to offend Qingyun sect and be despised day by day. How to calculate, choosing Gu Si to die is the best plan. Unfortunately, most of the viewers were gloating, and some even took out a photo stone to record the next ugly scene, making it impossible for her to lift her head forever. You. Yi Ming stood up suddenly, but his words came to a halt. What's it to him? Ye Changhuan willingly humbles herself. He doesn't need to care. Do you really think he's his master? She also deserves it. Yes, it's not his business. He doesn't care. Are you going to kneel down? Li Yu asked. Being able to exchange 10 meals for my younger brother's life is something that Si Shan has earned. Ye Chang laughed with a hint of cunning as if the fox had taken advantage and said, "It's my fault as a sister. I didn't teach him how to distinguish between good and false, and I couldn't discern people clearly." To this day, Si Shan is indeed guilty. Gu Si was stunned. When he heard the sentence, "It's not right of me to be a sister," his eyes involuntarily turned red. How many times did he really treat this person as his only relative, but she didn't really give him any warmth. He opened his mouth, but the next moment he saw Ye Changhuan kneeling straight down. Gu Si. The first person knocked her head and her voice was firm and clear. "My servant is guilty. The sin in teaching is worthy. Gu Sishan." Gu Sishan struggled and shouted, the iron hook on the pipa bone being rubbed deeper, and blood flowing down from the cracked wound. What kind of crazy talk is she talking about? When did she teach him? Why kneel down? The second head knocked down. The maid is guilty. The sin lies in being indecent in dealing with others. Yi Ming tightly embraced the sword in his arms, his face looking unprecedentedly ugly. The third head knocked down. The maid is guilty. The crime lies in making friends carelessly. The banquet at the hanging cliff is vivid in my mind, but my once thought confidant deceived her into eternal calamity. The fourth head knocked down. The maid is guilty. The sin lies in her unclear understanding of people. She treated her like her elder brother's senior brother, always hoping that she wasn't born. Hate her for taking over Yi Changhuan's destiny. The fifth head knocked down. The maid is guilty. The sin lies in bad luck. She should have been an iron-fisted figure in the business world, but unfortunately, she was chosen to suffer in this otherworldly world. The sixth head knocked down. The maid is guilty. The sin lies in her unfortunate fate. She has a deep mind, she has no heart or lungs, and to this day she can no longer distinguish which one is herself. She is content to be unwilling to make this string puppet. But everywhere I hit a wall. The blood on my hands hasn't dried up yet. She's not willing. The seventh head knocked down. The maid is guilty. The sin lies in her poor understanding of others. Originally, she thought that her so-called relatives, close friends, fellow disciples, and even passers-by saved by momentary pity, but each and every one wanted her to die. The eighth head knocked down. The maid is guilty. The sin lies in fate, not in anyone else. Everything is fate, not at all dependent on people. But she doesn't believe in fate. The ninth head knocked down. The maid is guilty. The sin lies in the absurd imagination. Her delusions turn the tide. Fantasy to go against the sky. But she's right. By the 10th moment, no sound could be heard around her. Blood was oozing from her head, as if a demon had crawled up from the ground. Looking at these people who were kneeling down from above, word by word, she knocked down heavily. The maid is guilty. The sin lies in being a cunning flatterer. Boom. With a muffled thunder in the sky, Li Yu took a half-step back awkwardly against his black pupils, his heart filled with turmoil. Since it is a great competition, cultivating and transforming oneself into a feather, ascending to immortality is the strongest, and the strongest is revered. Why can't she ascend to the highest position, the leader of all immortals? Those who don't go smoothly, kill them. Those who disobey, kill them. Whoever blocks me, kill him.